Station 51, engine 27, engine 32, truck 105.
You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf. Welcome back to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing some pretty innovative wildfire suppression and containment technology, I think. But, I'm prejudiced because I came up with it. So if you really want to know if it's any good or not, go take a look at it on the web. It's at teamwildfire.com. With us today, live from the Bakersfield, California area, is Battalion Chief Quincy Sloan. You seem to be pretty much of a Bakersfield guy through and through. I see you went to school in Bakersfield and now you work in Bakersfield. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm from Bakersfield, born and raised, 54 years, worked for Bakersfield Fire 30 years, and then just recently transferred over to Fillmore.
Okay. And you transferred because?
Well, did my 30 years with the department, retired there, and then still had the fever and was able to go over as a battalion chief at Fillmore.
Very nice. Okay. So tell me about Bakersfield and what is it that held you there for so long?
Well, family. So my mother and my grandparents are all from Bakersfield. Most people from this area, we take it for granted, but we're known for Buck Owens being the Nashville of the West. A lot of country, a lot of oil fields. We just opened a Hard Rock Cafe here locally, a casino, not cafe, Hard Rock Casino here in our area. Okay. So that's been a big deal.
Well, nice. So you put in 30 years, you're really a pretty service-oriented guy there. I mean, if 30 years wasn't enough, you had to go back and serve some more.
Well, I mean, when I came up, it was really all I wanted to do. And I'm sure you've interviewed many that started off by watching some sort of a firefighting program, and Emergency was mine back in the day.
Mine too.
So
TMG 365.
Yep, and I was hooked. And as soon as I was able to become an explorer in high school and ride out with fire department, I did.
Wow. Okay. Have you rewatched the series since?
Oh, man, yeah. I've watched it multiple times.
Yeah, that's my Sunday morning jam.
Yeah. Still, to me, there's a lot of, even though it was made in the, I think, late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah,
still,
72 or 75, I think.
Yeah. There's a lot of things we still do, even though that was 40 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. What was it about the show that hooked you?
So, outside of the camaraderie, I really like the station dynamic. I really enjoyed seeing how every time they responded on a call, how they just helped people in a way that, people, they were in some sort of emergency, whether it be medical or be a rescue. And it was some way that those firefighters were able to use techniques to help them and rescue them and then come out of sometimes the expectations that they were going to save someone, sometimes they didn't. And so I really liked how realistic it was, and I wanted to be a part of it.
I imagine in 30 years you've had that same experience. Well, 30
I have.
plus years.
Yeah, I have.
So,
the camaraderie, but then also, there's some downsides to the fire service as well as the good sides. 90% is great, but then there's that 10%.
So in the leadership position, you must have had, guys serving under you who've, lost a house, lost patients, etc. What's the counsel that you offer for that?
Well, one of the big things about what's new now that wasn't there for me 30 years ago was the mental health aspect and the help to understand different feelings and understanding what stress does to the body. So a lot of times what we do already, communicate on the fire engine, that's a lot of times the best therapy to change a post-traumatic stress injury and then from preventing a disorder. We've got about 30 days to prevent a disorder. So with that being said, with the new ones that came in, just always being alert to any change in behavior and making sure they understood that they had someone to come communicate to if they had any problems or if there was something that they were, concerned with.
Okay. So do you think that when firefighters or rescue personnel lose someone, do they see that as a failure, or do they see that as just your job is to do the best you can, not to be able to control the outcome?
Well, I think the answer to that, it depends on how you've been mentored. I was mentored that our goal is to make things better. And sometimes, realistically, making things better is just showing up. Doesn't mean necessarily we're going to save the person. Doesn't mean we're going to save the house. It just means that we're going to do our best so as to normalize something, a tragedy. And what's interesting, that's what crisis leadership is. That's what governments are expected to do. We're expected to make sure that people can have meaningful relationships and that they can thrive. So when those things, like an emergency happens, so they expect us to come in, whether it be fire, EMS, or law enforcement, to make things back to where they can thrive and have meaningful relationships. That's crisis
Oh,
leadership.
yeah. So what are some of the tenets of leadership that you apply?
Well, to me, there's three things in the fire service, I think, that not just in the fire service, but in labor in general, that affect the morale and affect productivity. So those three, I call them the three C's. So confirmation bias, that's one, where we go into a fire service thinking we're going to help people, but then we get to the station and um, people already have thoughts of what they feel we should be like. And so we're trying to then be, the second part of that is, the second C is conform. And if you're not a conformer and you're more of an out group, then it can become very problemsome for the person coming into that firehouse. And lastly, culture. When we see culture, when it doesn't align with the mission, that also becomes very hard for an employee to come in to accomplish his duties or her duties. So those are the three things that I see that really complicate the firehouse and that dynamic, and a person being able to either enjoy the career or not enjoy it.
Okay. And I
Hope
see a
that makes
lot.
sense.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
it does. It does. And it seems like a lot of the posts you see on LinkedIn and other places about the fire service, pertain to the culture.
It
That
is.
either a culture of positivity or a toxic culture, uh, or somewhere in between. Well,
Yeah.
what do you do? How do you make the right culture in a firehouse?
Well, a lot of this comes from the heart, and we're not heart surgeons. So keep in mind that we just have to, it's knowledge like anything else. And when culture or when discipline is weaponized, it then becomes a problem. So then leaders have to then see the difference. They have to make sure that they're being fair and equitable to everyone, but yet it does come from the top down. And then when it comes to confirmation bias, um, just remembering as a leader that I might not be the one, I might be not be the informal leader that everyone looks up to. A lot of times, leaders like to see themselves in those that they lead, and then in addition, leaders like to see themselves in the conformers, so that that's who they see themselves so like. So what happens is in that particular way or in circumstance, you can have, without a chief saying anything, just his body language, when he looks at one employee over another, all those things are a tell of how that leader really thinks about his employees. So, how to combat that, and the conformer, the confirmation bias, the culture, the weaponization of culture is really going to depend on a leader.
Okay. So you said talk about seeing yourself in the leader or the leader seeing themselves in you. So does that mean, you coming into the station house, 30 something years ago, and the leader saying, "Boy, you remind me a lot of myself 30 years ago."
Well, that's interesting you said that. So, not necessarily did someone say, "Hey, you remind me of myself," but someone, when I doubted myself, when I doubted me ever becoming a firefighter, I remember an old salty captain. He was from New Jersey, and he's over here on the West Coast. And I remember him saying, "Hey, kid, you know what? You look like a firefighter." and you're going to be a firefighter. And, that really encouraged me because in my mind, I look different. To him, I look like a firefighter. So that made all the difference in me pursuing that career. Just that was if this old salty captain can say, hey, you're going to be a firefighter, it felt good. So that's the things that we need to do, to those who really have the desire and the ability to be a good firefighter. We have to not look at a template that says looks like me, but necessarily give them the encouragement to say, hey, you can do this.
I see. So that would be the fourth C then, confidence.
Confidence. We're going to throw it in there. Let's go, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's interesting, I think, about confidence is that confidence can be borrowed or lent, right? That if someone doesn't have confidence in of their own, you can show confidence in them, and through doing so, they become more confident themselves. Have you seen that? So, how do you go about doing that?
I guess the best way is to stay knowledgeable. That's why I stay engaged. And one of the things I like to do is teach continually, rather it be teach EMT skills. That's really to help the young ones, but also to keep me up on my skills. And then as well as teaching in the firefighter academies, these keep me engaged in what's new, but also how to really help young ones see that they're not superhuman. And when I say that, really helping them to see how their mental health develops through the fire service. A lot of them never even think that they've had any trauma. And 1 to 18 is where they get the most trauma. So when you tell them that, those experiences, you can push them down deep, and as you get older, they start to resurface. So helping them to learn how to deal with trauma is very important, and that's what keeps me engaged.
Okay. So how do you deal with it? Because I had the same experience you described, right? My first day on the ambulance, there was a plane crash. 173 people were dead. We worked the scene for 3 days looking for survivors. And when they finally, broke us loose of the scene, they're like, okay, guys, walk it off. We'll see you on Monday.
Yeah. See, that's one of so
we've been there, right? I mean,
So how we deal with that is, okay, so we know that the studies of PTSD from soldiers, and this, so it started in the 50s and actually in World War II.
Shell shock, they called it,
shell
right?
shock. So one of the things that they noticed is those that started to communicate what they experienced right after when they went into those hospitals, they were able to recover a lot quicker and get back to the battleground. So that's where the studies of actually how to keep first responders, that's what it came from. It came from us, all the having the debriefings quickly after the incident, the after action reviews. These were all opportunities for us to talk and speak, which then that's what helps with trauma. We have to talk it out. If you're married, going home, talking to a mate, that's one of the number one ways, firefighters or first responders can help themselves, is talking to their significant others. So, that's the things we tell these new ones coming in, like, you need to communicate. And if you're not having a regular routine of working out, drinking water, doing the things to get rid of that cortisol and adrenaline that's built up from those calls, then that could be a problem. It's not getting enough sleep. So we give them all the clues to say, you're not well and you need to seek some help. We didn't get any of that when we came on the job.
No, we did not.
We acted soft. It was like, you know what, go cry in your pillows, but don't come cry to me. That's the way we came up in.
Yeah, right. Not the healthiest.
No, not the healthiest at all.
But I guess it was more of a filtration system then, because if you couldn't get your head back on right, you were out of the game.
Yeah. The one thing I noticed, Steve, is 30 years ago, I remember working with captains. You'd have those, good captains, bad captains, and you would see them change. Like, they would be okay with their crew, but if something just tweaked off, like you got an overtimer, or you were I was the overtimer, how they would change. They would their behavior would change. Some of the things they wouldn't say were, especially on calls, it just wasn't reasonable. Well, now that I've, as a certified trauma service specialist, now I see the problem it wasn't them. It was their stress level. They weren't able to control it. So once that amygdala kicked in,
Yeah.
right? The hippocampus stopped and it overrided it, and it didn't, that to them, they thought they were saying something that made sense, but ultimately it wasn't. And they were angry, or they were, so it wasn't the captain, and what they needed help understanding what they were, that trauma that had been built up over time. Now I get that. But back then I was just like, that's a weird cat. I don't ever want to work overtime at this station again.
Right. Very. Wow. Interesting. So so basically just when people drink a lot, they say, oh, that don't worry about what he's saying. That's the alcohol talking. This is the equivalent of, that's the trauma talking.
That's the trauma talking. Absolutely, Steve. And now I get that. And that's what kind of what I try to do my best to teach new recruits. And this is what you're going to experience. You're going to get deer in the headlights. That's because that amygdala is taken over, fight or flight. They basically have lost all contact with reality, and to them, staying in place and doing nothing is the best thing to keep them feel safe, because people are trying to feel safe. That's why they train us over and over and over, so that we can basically override that stress induced state. But there are points where, just depending on the day, how tired we might be, we can easily get into a state where we become unreasonable. That's why I think with first responders, especially police officers, they expect them to do so much. Come in these, they're already heightened, they're already hypervigilant, they don't know who they're dealing with. Then all of a sudden, they're supposed to control their stress when someone's yelling and screaming at them. That's the body. You're trying to shut the body's normal mechanism, how it deals with stress, down, and then respond in a way that you can de-escalate. That's a hard task. That's a very hard task.
That's learned. Look, Quincy, I got a question about leadership, because you've been in a leadership position for a while. Do you feel that as a leader, it's harder to share with your team, or because everyone's basically bringing their trauma to you or looking to you to validate their experience? But then who do the leaders go to? Do you share with your subordinate team members as a way to set an example of how to release what you're feeling, or do you have to take it outside the station?
So there's a trick and balance to that. So there's certain things that you can't share departmental with with everyone, because again, chiefs are on a strategic level. They're 10,000 feet high, right? They're not on a tactical or task level. So how that is, hold on just a second. How that's relatable to how we get out some of our emotions, we have to have a smaller group. So it's okay to have a conversation with someone and be vulnerable, but that can be detrimental as a leader when it comes down to leading your group. The same way for them too. Whereas they might not be as comfortable speaking out with the chief in the room, so you have to be very careful with that. Mid-level chiefs like me, like a battalion chief, they're okay. But if you're talking about the leader of the organization, you're not going to get very much feedback from your crews. And I don't think a chief who has to sit in front of the council and has to basically lead a department, he's not going to be as open to talking to everyone, about everything that's going on in his life. But he does have to have an outlet somewhere, maybe a smaller group, other chiefs, other departments, somewhere that he can speak and have that ability to be as vulnerable and have trust.
It's a fine line, isn't it, Quincy?
It's a fine line. So there's just some balance. We want to be approachable, but then the expectations are a little bit different for a leader compared to those who are out there on boots on the ground.
I see. And the opportunity for sharing or unloading or spilling off the extra, just telling about what you're feeling, and I don't even have the right words for it, but
no, yeah, I know what you mean. Just offloading.
Offloading. Thank you. Right.
Yeah.
These are new words. Right. But that ability to offload is something that's available to you when you're on the department and you're around your peers, your coworkers, and during that period of career, people do have that escape valve for that surplus trauma or stress.
Yeah.
But
Stress
then when
relief valve.
stress relief valve, thank you, I love that. What's it set to 120, right?
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. But when
Exactly.
people retire, right, then they very often lose that daily contact with that peer group, and that's when you see those suicide rates start to climb.
Yeah. I can only tell you that, outside of my faith, my family has been a very important, has played an important role with how I've dealt with stress. And important enough, my wife has attended seminars with me where
Yeah.
there's been clinicians that explain what I'm going through as a first responder, but then what my wife is going through as a wife of a first responder. So, the, you know, they're, uh, I'm leaving for 2 or 3 days and she's home with our children, which they're all grown now, but I, there's that tug of war. Who's doing more, and so there's a lot at play when it comes down to the support structure a fire first responder has. My faith and family have been critical, but then there's also, that full routine, working out, eating right, and seeking therapy, and so on. Those things are critical in surviving a career as a first responder.
Yeah. So not only do you have the stress of the job, but you have the duties of the job itself, and just the way we've adapted or we're learning to deal with stress as a stimuli better now. We're also having to learn how to deal with fire in a different way,
Oh, absolutely.
right? And I would imagine new people on the job, they don't really have a baseline to compare fire behavior now with what it was. But in the course of your 30 plus years, I'm sure you've seen the changes. How would you characterize fire behavior now versus when you came on the job?
To make it as simplistic as possible, building construction has changed how we fight fire because of um, there is a building code, but building codes are the uniform building code is for how to um, use material to build a structure or what's acceptable. But that uniform fire code isn't made so that it can withstand fire. So what happens is cheaper material can do this. You can use cheaper or less material that can do the same thing. Hence, instead of using good 2x4s or 2x6s, we went to trusses, and then now we went to glued beams, and now all this. Now we got foam, and all these things. They're strong under weight, but yet when you put them when they're under fire conditions, they become extremely toxic. BTUs go off the roof. So now us going in and doing interior firefighters is not as much of an option, and we have to use what's called a risk analysis. This risk analysis helps us to really understand when we commit to an interior or do more. So then basically we risk a lot for a savable life. We risk little for savable property. We risk nothing for property or lives already gone. And so with that risk analysis, a company officer or chief officer is able to now say, okay, is it worth sending live firefighters into this building that might be under construction or there's no one home? There's a lot of, that's what's really changed over the years is firefighters become a lot more, they have more situational awareness compared to when I first came on. If you wanted to get first water on fire, no matter what it was, if it was vacant, it didn't matter. You just want to get in there and put first water before the next unit gets there. Today's firefighters are they use the brain. Like, okay, is it worth it? Everyone wants to go home, and now it's even. You think about what's changed. We might have better equipment, but now some of our equipment might be causing us cancer. So there's so many just elements that have changed in the last 30 years when me coming on the job. Leaders have to do a lot more in reference to how they take care of their people.
So it's a more paternal job function now than simply an analysis of what's the fire doing and what's our response going to be.
Right.
It's taking care of your people.
Exactly. So we have a management system that works well, an incident command system that basically manages all personnel, helps make sure that everyone's accounted for. But then we got the equipment, we got nice, beautiful fire engines, and we've got turnouts that protect us from the heat, and SCBAs that now make us work a little longer inside fires. Rather, back in the day, we had 15 minutes. Now we've got, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes of working. But now, it's, we have an influx of people. We have, the homelessness issue problems now. We have the dynamic of the polarization in society. Black communities, Indian communities, Latino communities. All these things that are actually pulling us apart. Well, firefighters and police officers and EMS are all serving these same people. We can't have all these opinions, but sometimes those creep in. So it's just it's a different department than now than when I came on.
And political differences too. Right?
Absolutely.
You pull up to a fire and they've got some politician's name on the sign there, and like, screw that guy, this house burn. Right?
Yeah. It's all good if you're on the same side, but it's when you're not that becomes.
Yeah, that's right.
House might just burn. No, I'm just kidding. They would never. I would hope that no one would let a house burn just because of who they politically choose. But
I hope not too. And
yeah, they might joke about it.
They wouldn't, right?
Though. They don't even joke about it on the way back to the station.
Yeah, right.
But they would do the job.
Let me ask you. Let me follow up on what you just said. Joke about it on the way back to the station. I want to ask you about the role of humor in the job. It seems like humor is, nature's stress relief valve.
I agree with that, and I have been around some of the funniest individuals I've ever. Just these guys are characters, and I mean they can make anybody laugh. I mean, I would, if I can just record some of these guys back in the day and some of the just things that they say, just hilarious. Just wish I could have recorded and just so I can play it back. When I want to laugh.
Yeah. So do you use humor to break the tension with your crew?
I don't think that I'm not as spontaneous. And you have to be careful with firefighters. A lot of times they like to joke or tell jokes about each other, razz each other. And we have guys that are just real quick. I'm not real quick. So if I don't want to start something, I can't stop.
Okay. Yeah.
And depending on the guy, if he starts on it, I'm just going to take it because I don't want to get him mad.
That's funny. That's funny. You talked about the building code changing, right? And how it was changing for structural value, but not necessarily for fire protection. But there's not really a code for what people put in their house, right? There's not a sofa code or a TV code or a pillow stuffing code or mattress. Well, there is a little bit of mattress code, but people are filling their house with things that are far more flammable than they did 30 years ago.
I think it's interesting too that when you see what people fill their houses like, you've seen Hoarders, the show Hoarders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's for real. And we've had fires in those houses, and you got someone that says, "Hey, they're still in there," and maybe just a core of their house is on fire, and so you got to go in there and look for them, and you're stepping over stuff. Listen, we go. One of the biggest ways that we say that we can be safe on an incident before an incident starts is go pre-plan. Mm-hmm. So usually with businesses, we can go pre-plan a business. Right. We can't pre-plan people's personal homes.
You can't because of the value of homes, or is there a policy against it?
Oh, well, it's just privacy laws. You can't go to a person's home, knock on the door. Hey, can I inspect your house so we can, in case it catches fire?
I mean, if they give you permission, it's not a privacy.
I guess if they give you permission, but I mean, you think about the thousands of homes, which home you can actually go in and say, hey, but I tell you what we do. Sometimes when we go on medical aids, those are times that we might take a peek and be like, oh, okay, wow, did you see that house? Yeah, we need to be very careful if we ever get a fire in that house. And we've had fires in those homes.
Right. If they do their own automotive maintenance work, they might have buckets of kerosene and parts cleaner and other things to know about. Yeah. Wow.
And when we're driving by, we're always we're always looking to see, in our minds where the next fire could be. And we're always training in the sense that, hey, what would we do with this residence or this commercial occupancy, this industrial complex? We're always looking our first in and training in that way to make sure that we can, be safe, as safe as we can on an incident.
Yeah, there's a book called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. And he said the main thing they do is just keep wondering what's the next thing that could kill me.
Yeah. That's called pre-planning right there.
And work the problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I would imagine in both of our estimations, people have changed also in the last 30 years. Young people, right? There seems to be like a difference in how people are reached and how people are motivated, and what their work ethic is. How have you adapted the department to make it conducive to young people feeling at home there in a way where maybe if today's young person walked into the department 30 years ago, like they would just turn right around?
Well, I think understanding which generation they might be in is key.
Yeah.
But just remembering we were in that young person's same boots, because
Yep.
they were saying the same thing about us, as in, we weren't like that generation coming
Right.
in, like, so my generation that we had to really work extremely hard, put our heads down, couldn't say much to our superiors, just do whatever they said. And that was the generation, because they came from the World War II generation. So it was more, those individuals were soldiers. This day and age that we deal with those who really value trust. So as leaders, we're the ones that say, well, we can't have the attitude. They need to just put their head down and do what we tell them, because that's not the way they're programmed. They're programmed, well, I need to trust you first. No matter if they get the badge or not, they go through an academy. Yeah. Every opportunity that they get to be with a leader, they expect there's mutual trust. So that's really the key. And how do you get that trust? Communication, seeing how they like to do things, what they enjoy in life. And that means a compromise. I might not like anime, which I do like anime, but they like anime and they want to talk about anime. Okay, let's talk about anime. But you need to, that's how you get the next generation, whoever it might be, is to buy into the mission. Leaders have to conform to them, not vice versa. Because once you get their buy-in and they trust you, man, there's no limit to what they'll do for you.
That's powerful. Yeah. Wow. So let's talk about January Palisades and Eaton fire.
Yeah.
Everybody in the fire service is looking at that and trying to take lessons from it. What did you see there that would apply to your area, Fillmore, Bakersfield area?
Fillmore did send a strike team. They were with a strike team of engines from Ventura County and actually went to the Palisades. And it was very difficult for any organization. Now, you're talking LA County. That's where it started. So I believe it was LA City, but LA County assisted. So with any organization, we do more with less. So even for a department like LA City that has over 100 stations, you have LA County that has over 200 stations. You think, oh, wow, that's a lot of people. Well, in relation to how many people they serve, LA City serves 3 million. LA County serves 13 million. So then it still equates to probably the same size as a department like Bakersfield with 14 stations. We're designed for maybe 1 to 2 significant events. So when you start talking about type 1, type 2, type 3, or type 4 or 5 events, what that means is a type 1 is a major disaster. A type 2 is something that it's still large enough incident, but it's going to have multiple people, multiple engine companies. A type 3 incident, a local agency, maybe a county or city, can handle a type 3, like a 3-alarm fire. Type 2 is like an auto accident where you need extrication. A type 1 is just one unit. Or excuse me, a type 5 is just like a one unit, a medical aid. So the Palisades that was a type 1 incident. And so then and that was a type 1 incident like right now. It didn't just all of a sudden.
It
When those
didn't grow
push
from a
things,
3-alarm fire, right?
no, it didn't grow.
Yeah, right.
It was a major incident. So
Yeah.
it overran the resources for that area, and they were paying catch up. And if you learn anything from fire science, it's like a curve. The fire curve goes like this, and then the firemen are responding, and they're trying to reach and meet that fire curve with personnel. So that fire continued to grow at an immense rate that it was very hard to get resources. And those resources came from not just from California, but they came from the East Coast. So a lot of blame came on the fire agency itself, LA Fire Department, because they didn't upstaff or they didn't keep they knew the fire conditions were going to be different, or they were going to have high winds, so the chief could have assigned more firefighters. Well, people don't know that they were already in a deficit, as in the personnel. They didn't, so they already had holes that they had to fill. So it was just the perfect storm. But the chief ended up leaving because she didn't say things politically correct, but it was a lot more than just one department's problem.
Yeah. Well, if you think of that of a fire of that nature, as an act of nature, right? A storm descends on the city, and you have this building-to-building conflagration, and there seems to be a lot more finger pointing than if we looked at it the way we'd look at an earthquake or a tsunami or something.
Right. Exactly. And
nobody's going to say like, "Oh, all the bridges are down, everyone's fired," right?
Yeah. You're looking at talking to some of the Fillmore firefighters that were there. They said in minutes, a whole block would be involved. An apartment complex. It's how fast this fire would move. A whole apartment that was a block long was up in flames. And you have one fire engine there because that's all the resources you had. And you're talking about, this is all happening within 1 hour. Pretty, so expectations, those are for anyone who lives in Southern California, they understand the power of these wildfires. And if there's not much you can do with a Santa Ana wind, 75 to 100 mile an hour winds pushing this fire, that's just not the expectation of a fire department. I wouldn't expect them to be able to stop that. We can only do what we can.
Yeah. Right. So what do you think, if we wanted to be able to do better, what would we change? Would it be staffing? Would it be technology? Would it be building codes? Would it be some of everything?
Cal Fires has a real good model. They've been working with, if you live in a wildland area, there is 100-foot clearance, making sure roofs are created with non-combustible material, keeping combustibles away from the home. There's all type of technology coming out with types of sprinklers that you can put in the attic area. I think all new building construction has to have fire sprinklers, connected. So there's a lot of things that are being introduced, but it's still going to take a lot of support from home residents to comply. And there's some people that say I'm not going to do anything the government tells me to do. So it's a joint effort between residents and the government. And I think, like I said, Cal Fire has a very good model in fire prevention. And if we can follow that, that's going to help with future incidents.
Yeah, I guess when you look at that and you look at the level of loss and how little we could do about it, and we grant like every firefighter on the job's doing the absolute best they can, and when the best that everyone can do adds up to basically not making much difference at all, there has to be like a new best. There has to be something that enables a best that's many times what today's best can be. I wonder where that's going to come from.
And Steve, you mentioned something, we have to not handicap ourselves. We
Yeah.
do have to understand that we can't save everybody, can't save
No.
everything,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
So we need a new thought process.
So describe what that would look like.
Just I think the vulnerability when it comes down to an organization and helping the public understand that we want to do our best, but without those partnerships, that collaboration, that which is cross organization, whether it be fire and police, different colored fire engines, EMS, that collaboration is going to be key in having less ego and
Yeah.
more team effort, and thinking of the team not just as your own organization, but that system that helps the public.
Do you feel like the way people, well, the way you and I, we looked up to, Gage and DeSoto and like, oh, these guys are heroes, right? But they still lost patience sometimes. Um, do you feel like the public's perception of the fire department as this heroic agency maybe creates false expectations of their capacities?
Um, I think that also is relative, Steve. It, the most parents teach their kids to respect authority, respect the fire service. That's good guys, whatever the case is. But relative opinion has changed. People aren't as I don't think that they look at the fire service as saying they might. I think they look at our pay, and that might be how they perceive firefighters. They might look at what they don't do compared to what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You can have some negative perceptions. I think that people and that we listen to are wanting more accountability from government, and so then who do they see most? They don't see President Trump. They see a fire engine, and that's government. So there's a lot of there's um, perception out there, and so we have to be careful of how we, as in the fire department, we can't expect everyone to view that we're heroes.
Right. Well, I do a lot of social listening, as they call it, in the fire space, and read most of the articles that come out about fire-related matters. And I don't really remember hearing at all prior to Palisades a department stating what its capacity was. You didn't hear people say, well, the agency is designed to be able to fight X number of fires at a time, or the hydrant supply system was designed to be able to put out 0.1% of the homes at any given moment, not 100% of the homes. And so maybe it's because it never came up before, but there really wasn't a transparency about what the limitations of the agency were, so that people could have realistic expectations of what to expect from them. And you could go to the taxpayers and say, basically, we're funded to be able to do this. And if you want us to do more than that, we're going to need more resources.
Yeah, I think, like, again, government is always pushing for a return on investments. Those when you look at these governing bodies, that are elected, when it comes down to it, they're looking for that return and that investment from their fire departments, from their police departments. And government is always designed to do more with less. So it does take a lot more maneuvering, tact, to get the funds needed. Prevention is a big thing now, but not big fires don't necessarily mean that people are going, governing bodies are going to make a change in how they support their agencies. It's just lives aren't they would never say this, public, but
Right.
lives are not the what dictate how they operate an organization. It's really money.
It's voters.
Money, capitalism.
Right.
Voters. Yes.
Right. Yeah, right. I'm sure that the response rate in a community that's not known for voting is very different than one that, is more influential on who's in power.
Absolutely.
Right. They get
Absolutely.
responded to. Yeah. What a bunch of challenges, huh?
There's always those, but for us in a civil servant role, we always have to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. It's our responsibility to de-escalate, not to escalate problems. We're there to make things better, help people thrive, maintain meaningful relationships.
Well, you do a great job of that. Yeah,
Thank you, Steve.
really great. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
You're welcome, Steve, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This is Battalion Chief Quincy Sloan with the Fillmore Fire Department, formerly and lifelong with Bakersfield prior to that. Thanks so much for joining me. Really fascinating to see your perspectives and how they've grown and changed over the years since you first joined the department. Quincy Sloan, thanks so much. I'm Steve Wolf. You're listening to The Fire Break, sponsored by Team Wildfire. Until next time, be well, take care, be safe.